Hello to everyone. I would like to welcome our audience to this World Data Forum sessions on the World Settlement Footprint suite of products and how these unique global data sets can help understanding better the trends in urbanizations globally. My name is Mark Paganini. I work at the European Space Agency, and it's an honor for me to moderate this session. I will do it with my colleagues Denis Mwanicki from UN Habitat and Thomas Hecht from the German Aerospace Center. I don't need to tell you how important is the monitoring and understanding of urbanization processes if we want to achieve our sustainable development goals. We reach a point where more than half of the world population live in cities, and projections say that the share of human population will rise to 60% by 2030. These are really amazing numbers. So rapid and unplanned urban growth has brought a lot of challenges that cities authorities are faced with. And to plan well the future of our cities and put in place effective urban planning measures, we need to have really reliable information on the location of human settlements, on the morphology of the cities, but also on the trends of urbanization's patterns over the years. And that's where satellite observation with the latest advance in digital technologies can really bring new perspectives. So today we have the chance to have 6 eminent panelists who will present the WSF suite of products, but also share with with us, their experience with this unique data set, giving us also different views on its use. So we will listen to Simonetta Kelly from the European Space Agency, Mattia Marconcini from the German Aerospace Center, Robert Ndugwa from the UN Habitat, Nale Mudau from the South African National Space Agency, Tao Welan from the International Committee of the Red Cross, and Sameh Waba from the World Bank. So you can find a short biography of our panelists on the WOVA platform. We have organized this session with first a series of lightning talks from our panelists, and this will last about 45 minutes. And this presentation will then be followed by a Q&A sessions of about 10 minutes. You are all kindly invited to post your questions on the WOVA platform, but in the interest of time, we will be able to take only a few of these questions, but we can assure you that all your requests will be answered offline. So I will start by giving the floor to Simonetta Kelly, who will put the World Settlement Footprint into context. So Simonetta is the head of strategy, program and coordination office of the ESA Director of Earth Observation Program. So Simonetta, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for giving to the European Space Agency the chance to present the value of satellite and Earth observation, in particular in support of activities related to urbanization. I think it's becoming clear recently how important it is to use tools which can support all the policies, including the ones related to disaster reduction and the new urban agenda. We heard also Mark saying that we reached a milestone in 2008 when half of the population actually is now living in the cities, and the next milestone, which is forecasted, is in 2030, when over 60% of the overall world population will be living in cities. So next slide, please. Here, I'd like to make reference exactly to the text. Of course, we know the SDGs. One of the SDGs, as you know, it's related to urban, and Earth observation, I must say, is at the heart of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. And actually, in Article 76 of this Sustainable Development Goals Agenda, you have reference to Earth observation and to the essential scale of contribution and the strategic relevance of Earth observation in support of all these SDGs. And this is exactly why we're here, and why we work so closely with all the statistical offices, the UN agencies, in collaboration to implement most of the 17 SDGs. Next slide, please. You see here clear examples of the Earth observation use in support of activities related to urbanization. And you have a number of related areas, which are, of course, the monitoring of the green areas is one of those things you can do with Earth observation, but you can also look at the extent of the urban settlements. You can look at transport and infrastructure. You can look at waste sites and also the quality of the water, and also at landslide risk and terrain motion with interferometric techniques. and the density of the population. So a lot of variables which are very much well monitored through Earth observation and through satellites. Next slide, please. You see here the wealth of data that you have today available and the ones you will have available in the coming years. In fact, in Europe, the European Space Agency has 17 satellites in operations in the field of Earth observation, including those from the Sentinels, the European Copernicus program with the European Commission. And we have 37 satellites in development, which will make their data available in support of environmental issues, climate change issues, but also urban activities in the coming years. These are free and open data. So basically about 250 terabytes of data from the Sentinels are available and distributed to users every day. And this is an enormous, incredible wealth of different type of data. In fact, they come from radar instruments, optical instruments, altimetry instruments that are available for all who need to use it, including institutions, the commercial sector, and the scientists. Next slide, please. You see here that there is a new trend in the field of Earth observation and the areas we're working in space, which is the fact that not only you have big data available. So today we have these big streams of data from European, not only European satellites, and you need to integrate those data with technologies and with, in particular, digital technologies, IT technologies, to make sure that you can process and make available to the end users really what they need. In fact, the end users, including those in the field of urban activities, they don't care which data come from which satellites, but they really need to have a product which is tailored to their needs and which fits their requirements. And that's why we're increasingly integrating IT technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning into the processing of our data to make sure that all this data revolution can be beneficial for everybody. We leave no one behind. Next slide, please. You see here the reference to SDG11. Of course, SDG11 is really what we're talking here today about. It's the aim to renew and plan human settlements in a way that offers opportunities for a while reducing the impact on the environment and the use of the resources. Of course, to do this, you need accurate, you need regular, reliable, frequent information over the same location. And this you can really do well with satellites because satellites turn around the Earth at about 800 kilometers and they regularly pass over the same area of the world. Some satellites, even like Sentinel-5P, which looks at the quality of the air, passes every day over the same area. And so you have the capability to look at the extent of human settlements, you look at the density of the population, you look at things which basically are relevant for those who need to monitor cities and see and make sure that cities become more safe, more resilient, and more sustainable. Next slide, please. What we have done in ESA, we have worked together with the German Aerospace Center, with DLR, and this collaboration has also been extended to Google Earth Engine. And what we have done, we have generated a world settlements footprint. And that's here we want to present briefly this suite, which is a number of world settlement footprints with, of course, as I mentioned, open and free global data sets, which aim at supporting the understanding of the urbanization at the level of planetary scale with very much unprecedented detail and accuracy. Next slide, please. What we have done in particular, we have looked at a layer which is already available. It's a layer at 10-meter resolution, and this layer at 10-meter resolution is a binary mask which outlines the global settlement extent, and it's based on a full-time series of Landsat and Sentinel-1 images. And you see those basically were acquired in 2015. This is already available, and we have some new suite products which are coming up very soon in the coming weeks, I would say. One is the global settlement growth, which is the second one here on the left. It's a 30-meter resolution, and it looks at over 35 years from 85 to 2015, and basically collects 7 million of Landsat scenes. And those information give us an insight about past and the evolution of the urbanization of a certain areas. We have a third product here, which is a world settlement footprint, a different one at 10-meter resolution. This is the first global data set of built-up areas, and that will be available at 10-meter resolution and entirely based on Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 data with an unprecedented resolution and with an unprecedented precision. Next one, please. This is not, in fact, only what we've done, but we are also working still with DLR, and we are actually developing 3 other additional layers. These are currently being finalized, and they are validated, and they will be released in the coming months. So these include, on one side, the imperviousness world settlement footprint and the world settlement footprint of the population at 10-meter resolution. And those one basically give us, on top of the information on the population, also the imperviousness. And this is a very important factor if you look at risk management related to cities and urban development. And on the right, you see the last one, last but not least, I would say, which is a 3D vision of the average bleeding height and volume globally at 9-meter scale. And it's quite unique in this kind and will give a vision from a different perspective, so the height perspective of the buildings over the cities. So this is what we wanted to very briefly introduce you today. It's an international collaboration, of course, it's between DLR, the German Aerospace Center, ESA, but Google, but of course this involves all of you in terms of potential users, and I think it's quite relevant to show and demonstrate the value of Earth observation in support of urbanization. Thank you, and I think with this one I'll leave the floor to the next speaker.
Yeah,
questions.
Thanks, Simonetta. We'll have questions at the end of the session. So thanks for these very nice introductions. So I will now give the floor to Mattia Marconcini, who will give you more details on the WSF datasets. Mattia is a research scientist at the Smart Cities and Spatial Development team at DLR. So DLR is the German Aerospace Center, but he's also the man behind most of the datasets that are presented to you today. So Mattia, now the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Mark, and especially thanks a lot to Simonetta for a very nice introduction. So let's pick it up from the end of our talk. The WSF suite is a collection of open and free high-resolution layers, which aims at characterizing urbanization globally with unprecedented quality. And in particular, within the next few months, this suite is envisaged to include the 6 different datasets listed here. So the goal of this talk is to provide you with a brief overview and example on each of them. So the first product of the suite has been, Simonetta pointed out, the WSF-2015 10-meter resolution binary mask outlining the 2015 global settlement extent derived by jointly exploiting multi-temporal Sentinel-1 radar and optical Landsat 8 satellite imagery. The WSF-2015 proved to be the most accurate product of its kind, as assessed based on 900,000 validation samples collected by crowdsourcing photo interpretation of Google Earth images. Specifically, it proved capable of reliably outlining not only major cities, but also suburban and rural areas where still about half of the global population is estimated to be. As one can see from the example here of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, the layer is particularly accurate and reliable. However, thanks to the availability of Sentinel-2 data and further improvements in the underlying approach, in the past months, we have been able to generate a 10-meter resolution, the novel WSF-2019, which exhibits even higher quality and detail, as one can appreciate in zoom here in the lower left corner. This is also supported as well by an extensive validation based on about 780,000 crowdsourced labels. So here you can see a quick look of the global data set. 3 different zooms on as many locations, which highlight the high spatial detail in the case of Guatemala City, where one can also appreciate that roads from highways to residential have been ultimately masked out, and the further enhancement in outlining smaller settlements, single isolated buildings located in the suburban and rural region, as in the case of Dhaka and Kigali, thanks to the employment of Sentinel-2 imagery in place of Landsat 8. Anyhow, our aim is to provide further information besides outlining the mere settlement extent. So in this regard, we aimed at estimating the percent impervious surface, which describes for each pixel the actual portion on the ground covered by paved surfaces, and is considered as a good proxy for the building density. So this resulted in the WSF 2019 imperviousness layer, which which we expect to become a support for several applications, as for instance, characterizing the urban Italian phenomenon or assessing the risk of urban floods. To give you an idea of how relevant the dataset could be for characterizing urban morphology, let's consider the three regions here enclosing Kinshasa-Brazzaville, Dublin, and Bangalore. So while the corresponding total settlement extent is quite similar, they show completely different imperviousness patterns. Bangalore exhibits, in general, pretty high values everywhere. On the contrary, Dublin, apart from the old city center and industrial sites, is associated with rather low values. Whereas in Kinshasa and Brazzaville, one can see a gradient from the densely built-up center to the suburban areas. But also, to quantify the amount of persons at risk, information on population density is of key importance. To this purpose, we are about to complete the WSF 2019 population layer, where census figures available at the finest administrative level are used to estimate the number of people per pixel by jointly considering building density, as from the imperviousness layer presented above, along with ancillary land use data. So the example here are meant to give you a taste of how much population density might vary worldwide. In Boston, apart from industrial and commercial areas which are excluded a priori from the analysis, values are relatively low everywhere. In Nairobi, where present, informality results in particularly high values for specific neighborhoods, while for Manila, we can appreciate high density in the vast part of the entire metropolitan area. Needless to say that for understanding urbanization, a proper knowledge of the past is mandatory. In such framework, we have generated the WSF-Evolution, a revolutionary dataset that outlines on a yearly basis the growth of the settlement extent at 30-meter spatial resolution so far from 1985 to 2015. The WSF-Evolution has been derived by processing the entire Landsat 5 and Landsat 7 archives, summing up to about 7 million scenes, and based on more than 1.2 million validation samples, it outperforms any other similar layer presented so far. So the example here for Dar es Salaam already gives a clear idea on its potential for characterizing settlement growth as never before. If we move the attention to the rest of the world, a nice example is that of Sacramento, which experienced a patchy growth over these 3 decades, often a sign of a thoroughly designed master plan. This is also evident in the static color representation here. And in contrast, other regions have informality instead as a major driver, like, for instance, Bangalore, which has been constantly growing in all directions, or Maputo in Mozambique, where whose extent has basically doubled, mostly northwards. It is worth noting that Landsat data availability varies across regions and over time. Whenever poor, this might prevent good quality of the WSF-Evolution independently from the implemented methodology. To make this transparent to the users, we then defined and computed the Input Data Consistency Score, IDC for short, which characterizes the goodness of the input Landsat imagery for each target year. The score ranges between very low to very good and might become a key tool to better interpret the results of any possible integrated analysis. Here you can see how it looks like for the year 2015, and here for the year 2000, where it is evident the gap in Central and Western Africa. Last but definitely not least, the suite includes the WSF 3D layer, which, unique of its kind, allows to estimate globally at 90-meter resolution the average building height and volume based on the 2012 TandemX digital elevation model, thus facilitating unprecedented environmental, socioeconomic, and climatological analysis. In the 3D representation here, the high-rise buildings in the central district of Dar es Salaam emerge quite clearly, as well as those located along the major road connected to the airport. Finally, let me conclude with some milestones. In particular, while the WSF 2015 is already available open and free from the Figshare repository, the WSF 2019 and WSF-Evolution are about to come. Sign it on the calendar. We will release them next 31st of October, not for Halloween, but in the occasion of the UN War Cities Day. The WSF 2019 imperviousness is now undergoing quality assessment. The population is being completed in these very days, While for the 3D, we need one last clearance before making it available. All three shall be there most likely by early 2022. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thanks, Mattia, for this detailed presentations of these amazing data sets. So our next speaker is Robert Ndugwa, who will tell us more about the value of the WSF for the new Urban Agenda and the SDG11. Robert is the chief of the data and analytics sections of UN Habitat, and he's also the lead of the global urban statistics at UN Habitat. So Robert, the floor is yours now.
Thanks a lot, Mark, and good morning, good afternoon, depending on where all the listeners are connecting in from. I'll share a bit of the experience from how we've been part of this collaboration, but also the ongoing work from UN Habitat. Next, please. So to start off this conversation, I think many presenters today have spoken very well about the trends that we are seeing around urbanization. And indeed, in this very fast urbanizing world, the SDGs or the new urban agenda will not be achieved unless we attain the urban dimensions of sustainable development. The key here remains on balancing the negative and positive trends that we're seeing as part of urbanization in a way that we don't basically, or we rather stay within the planetary boundaries. This is really crucial because we see a lot of positives, we see a lot of negatives, but the key here is how we balance those positives vis-a-vis the negatives. Next, please. So from the UN Habitat perspective, there's a lot of motivation as to why we're involved in this space. When we see all these emerging global challenges and opportunities, obviously this has informed our mandate and work, which seeks to promote socially and environmentally sustainable towns and cities with the goal of providing adequate shelter for all. UN Habitat in this role is a custodian agency for various SDG indicators, with the majority found in Goal 11, and we are also a focal point for new urban agenda monitoring as well as implementation. But at the same time, we are also the lead coordinator for the UN system-wide strategy on sustainable urbanization. All these various fronts are basically aimed at how well we can harmonize in terms of processing viable definitions, supporting global urban monitoring, but in this case also nurturing spatial and non-spatial measures that allow us to understand much better how our world is urbanizing. Most of these activities require us to work with many partners on areas such as methodological development and testing, capacity development, but also dissemination of viable tools and proven resources that can help countries to produce urban data in a more reliable manner. Next, please. So from this sort of perspective, we've been very much involved right on the onset of the SDGs in the area of Earth observation and geospatial information, particularly in terms of building the capacities of member states and other countries to enhance their reporting capabilities. In this regard, for us to ensure efficient and effective urban spatial monitoring, we do require different types of data for a variety of monitoring tasks, which somehow revolves around built-up areas and having the right population with the right levels of disaggregation. And I think this is the value add that we've seen from the World Settlement Footprint Suite, where most of these things have now been addressed at least 5 years, 6 years into the SDGs. Our main work on the Earth observation is mostly driven by the need to relate to the physical conditions, but also the spatial distribution of services or even the opportunities. And it also directly responds to new monitoring requirements for the SDGs, new urban agenda, but also other global mandates. As an example here, we've worked through a very well-developed partnership to develop the Earth Observation Toolkit, which basically brings together different actors as well as helping to create a central repository and a place with a lot of urban spatial analysis tools, but also resources, user cases, and other learning opportunities that are needed to support urban monitoring. This toolkit is now readily available, and I encourage many of you, I think, to go to the site and see how much it offers. Next, please. Perhaps speaking more in details to the World Settlement Footprint data suite, here we've been working very closely with all the partners, as you've heard from the last two presenters. And I think for us, the main motivation has been that many countries and cities were initially challenged by the need to produce all these high quality spatial data sets that are needed for SDG indicator reporting. And I think the WSF-Evolution here has now enabled scalable analysis and also computation of spatial urbanization trends at various levels, such as cities, national level, but also the global level. So this has really narrowed the gap in terms of the baselines that are needed for many cities, but at the same time also helping to improve the production of population disaggregated data. The WSF 3D, which I think, again, the two presenters have spoken about, is one suite that we are really interested in because it provides a new perspective that can at least provide different scales of density analysis and at the same time enhance our understanding of access to opportunities as well as services. So we are really in for this and a staunch partner and supporter for this product. Next, please. And last but not least is our ongoing work, again, through this partnership, but at least tailored towards one tool, the public transport access tool. And here we've worked very closely with the DRL and the WSF population roster to produce a tool that allows you now to almost process the data for SDG indicator 11.2.1. I think as noted, this will also be part of those tools released later in October. And obviously looking forward to many people making use of these tools to produce their national level data sets. In conclusion, I think cities and urban areas continue to grow very, very fast. There's an increasing need for real-time urban monitoring systems that can leverage the ever-growing open source imagery and resources. I think crucially here, we need to ensure that we drive towards sustainable cities and human settlements that depend on how well we measure or how well we understand those spaces and how well we can predict the patterns and growth in all those cities. I believe strongly that Earth observation and geospatial information technologies today give us the tools needed to move towards this sort of direction. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Robert, for showing the importance of such data sets for the new urban agenda and for the SDG11s and the various indicators for which you are the custodians. So we had the UN perspective. Now we move to a more a country perspective. I think can everybody mute themselves? I have a feedback of the sound to my to me. Okay, good. I think there's a problem with the audio. Huh? Okay, now it's. Hello. Okay, I hope that the problem is solved because it's really annoying. I think we have two. Okay.
Mark, it seems to be an issue at your side, actually.
It's on my side. Ah, okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Alors. So sorry for this. So the first guest speaker today is Nale Mudau from SANSA. Can you hear me? Okay. So she's from the South African National Space Agency. Nala is the lead remote sensing scientist at SANSA for what regards the development of human settlements, products and services from satellite imagery. She will explain the value of the WSF from a country perspective. I'm sorry for the audio problems.
Thank you. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be presenting on the need for high resolution data to support human settlement mapping and monitoring at a country level, and also how the WSF data will help in terms of closing some of the gaps that exist. Next slide, please. We need high spatial resolution imagery and data products to support a number of applications, from urbanization management, informal settlement mapping and management, to disaster management, including the health pandemic that we are dealing with, and also to support reporting of some of the development agendas, including SDGs, and also at a national level, agendas such as the National Development Plans. Next slide. So in South Africa, before the world settlement footprint, we have been relying on high resolution data, commercial high resolution data. So we've been acquiring spot imagery over the whole country from 2006 till 2017 to support users with access to high resolution data, and also data that they can use to derive some value and information to support their operations. So a number of users in the country are used to using aerial photography, and at the time, having access to this imagery was tried to close the gap in terms of the temporal gap that exists when relying on aerial photography. And next slide, please. So it was through that project where we initiated the National Human Settlement Layer project, which maps out the location of human settlements across the country. So that helps in terms of analyzing the spatial distribution of where settlements are, and also help in terms of classifying the different settlements that we have in the country. So the picture on the left shows the location or the spatial distribution of settlements around Tshwane or Pretoria area, and also the classification of human settlements types in Johannesburg City region, where we classify the different settlements, including townships and informal settlements, formal areas, industrial areas, and commercial areas. Next slide, please. So one of the applications that we developed is assessing urban growth around the cities. So we use the data that we have access to, which is human settlement data derived from spot imagery, to assess the urban growth around selected cities. And what we found out was that a number of smaller cities, or secondary, what we call secondary cities, are actually growing at a faster rate in terms of urban expansion compared to the major cities. So understanding these growth patterns can help a lot the local authorities in terms of managing their services, and also making sure that the developments are not compromising the natural environment. Next slide, please. So in the absence of the commercial high resolution imagery, the world settlement footprint will assist a lot in terms of continuing monitoring settlement developments, or just monitoring human settlements and also their growth patterns. So we assessed the world settlement footprint, the 2019, of selected areas in the country, and we found that the data maps out the location of settlements accurately, and also in rural areas where we don't have a lot of structures or higher density of structures, the data is able to really show the spatial distribution of building areas. And then, of course, in formal, around the cities where we have formal areas and also informal settlements, the world settlement footprint maps out the outline of the settlements, and also we are able to see open spaces within settlements, and also the outline of road network, which will help in terms of planning of services, and also understanding urban growth in such areas. Next slide, please. Another analysis that we found was that, or that we did, was by just looking at the spatial distribution of the settlement, or the settlement footprint, we are able to derive some information in terms of the settlement types by just looking at how the settlements or the footprint is outlined. For example, the areas are presented in the red dots represent informal areas versus the other areas which are formal. So already this shows one of the value-added products or information layer that can be derived from the world settlement footprint. Next slide. So in the absence of high resolution, which are mainly commercial, we will continue, or we can continue monitoring our settlements, urban settlements growth or settlement development using the world settlement footprint. As we can see, we have overlaid the spot human settlement data and also over the world settlement footprint, and we can clearly see the growth that occurred between the two time periods, 2014 and 2019. Next slide. And also you looking at some of the other products that were presented. For example, the evolution layer will also help us understand urban growth patterns in our cities. I think I would end up here next. Let's see if I've got anything else. Yes, in conclusion, the world settlement footprint will definitely provide base data that is required to understand human settlement developments from national, district, and in some cases also to a settlement level. They are, from the assessment, we can conclude that there can be a lot of information layers that can be derived from the world settlement footprint, such as informal settlement layer, and also the layer can also support other operations such as the disaster management, where we'll be able to overlay other information layers like flood rates, so that we are able to identify areas that could be at risk. Thank you.
Thanks, Nala. Thanks a lot also for showcasing the value of this data set, not only for urban areas, but also for understanding the growth in rural areas and also the informal settlements. I think this was really a very important point that you mentioned. So the fifth speaker we will hear today is Tao Welan from ICRC, which is the International Committee of the Red Cross. So Tao is a GIS and remote sensing analyst. She's based in Geneva, where she leads the remote sensing activities of ICRC, and she will explain to us the importance of such a data set for ICRC operations. So Tao, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. So as Mark mentioned, I will show you one of the applications we have with the WSF to improve the location quality of our operation. Next, please. The Sustainable Development Goals, as mentioned earlier, aim to ensure that no one is left behind. And next, the International Committee of the Red Cross and other humanitarian actors provide protection and assistance for population in situation of conflicts and natural disaster, no matter where they are. Next. Next again, please. So the ICRC is a neutral, independent humanitarian organization. Next. And it works in 90 countries with all parties to the conflict. However, it is often challenging for the ICRC to know exactly where the people we are trying to help are located. So this is one of the many tasks that the geodata and analytics team has to do to support our colleagues on the ground. Next. So in order to do it, the team uses different sources of information, different public sources of information. And like many open data sets, none of them is accurate or complete. We use several of them to triangulate the information. And the GUF and WSF produced by the DLR are an essential one. On the web app that you see here that we developed, you can see several layers. It's a bit small, but the one circled in blue is the WSF. Next. That is overlaid by the World Pub 2020. Next. And here in red, you can see that's our internal operational gazetteer. So in the circle, the blue and greenish circles, you can see that there is a match between what we have as a list of populated places and the WSF and the World Pub, but questions remain for the red circle. Next. So we developed a semi-automated process that uses the FME so that our layer of populated places is matched or not with the WSF. So there is an output, a table that shows if it's matched, if it's close, or if it's not matched. And to narrow down, we also intersect these populated places with our operational area because we cannot cover the entire country. So if it's matched, then there is no problem. If it's close, then in the output table, there is the distance in meters and the angle to look from the populated place so that our colleague in the field, our GIS colleague in the different countries can do the manual cleaning and then next validate or not if our populated place match the WSF layer. So when these places are validated and classified, according to the settlement's extent and size, they are then integrated to our internal operational master data set, which is accessible to all colleagues for the institution for their daily work in their different tools so that they can match it with where they aim to have operation. Next. Thank you, and I remain available for questions.
Thanks a lot, Tao. We will have one or two questions for you later during the Q&A session. So our last eminent speaker is Same Waba from the World Bank. Same is the director of the World Bank Urban Disaster Risk Management, Resilience and Land Global Practice. Unfortunately, Same cannot be with us in person today due to the time difference with the United States. So he sent us a video of his presentation, which will be played now. So what you have to know is that the World Bank has been one of the first adopters of the WSF suite of products, and Same will tell us more about the utility of this data set for the development assistance projects of the bank. So at this point, I need to ask Leanne to share our screen and play the video. This will come, just need to be a bit patient. We need to go full screen. Okay, perfect.
Good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. My name is Sameh Wahba. I'm the Global Director for Urban, Disaster Risk Management, Resilience and Land Global Practice at the World Bank. And I am really pleased to join you virtually today at the UN World Data Forum 2021. As more and more people move to urban areas every day, and we are expected to reach 70% of the urban population living in cities by 2050, and with 80% of GDP generated in cities and 70% of greenhouse gas emissions attributed to cities, our urban practice at the World Bank has been growing progressively. Now, we cover a whole range of issues from climate change to spatial planning. And in doing so, data is an integral part of what we do at the bank, and especially in these last 10 years. We've had major advances, both in terms of big data and insights that provides for current and future development trends and risk across regions, and also in the way we utilize evidence-based planning in our projects. We've also forged new partnerships, such as those with DLR in Germany, with the European Space Agency, and others that have really helped us to extend frontiers of knowledge in urban areas. Now, for our work, we are integrating different kinds of data that is available. Data that is looking from the sky, such as remote sensing data, data from drones and related products, as well as data looking from the Earth, such as locally collected data from surveys, community mapping, mobile phone records, and so on and so forth. Now, the use of innovative analytical tools, methodologies, and disruptive technologies has been a centerpiece and at the forefront of our work this past decade. Our partnership with DLR has opened new doors for us, and it allowed us to look at a three-dimensional data for cities, which is the first time we do that. This volumetric data, especially with the layer on building heights, has been especially useful in a series of analytical products that we did, starting from how we responded to the COVID-19 emergency last year. So we used building heights to estimate the available floor space per person, which has allowed us to distinguish between density, the livable type, from overcrowding. We've also identified areas where people will be unable to follow social distancing because the amount of floor space available per person is insufficient to allow the 3.4 square meters per person that would be the theoretical radius for social distancing. Now, we further combine that with data on proximity to basic service delivery points, and especially places where people will cluster even in a lockdown, like public water standpipes or public toilets, and by also aggregating slum level data for selected cities that enabled us with all this data to predict where are the COVID-19 contagion risk hotspots in cities. And we've done that for 53 cities across different regions. Now, this is one of the examples of our work on contagion risk hotspots and the resulting maps. As you can see from this map on the right, this is the city of Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the contagion risk hotspots cover a large portion of the city, accounting for almost 6 million residents at risk, over half the population. Now, similarly, building heights data also allowed us to understand the shape and growth of nearly 10,000 cities around the world. Now, we've used rigorous economic modeling of a range of data sets, and we found that the most successful urban areas are those that are capable of connecting physical growth to economic demand. These are what we call the pyramids, and which are able to support this with good plans, policies, and investments that helps to avoid the uncontrolled sprawl, which is resembling the pancakes. Now, that same building heights data set that I spoke about earlier also allows us to examine the flooding risk and the resilience by comparing pyramids to other cities. Now, within the disaster and the resilience space, using the World Settlement Footprint Evolution dataset, our team has been tracking the flood risk exposure of growing cities. So as you see, this is an example of a map from Bangkok on the left. The dataset allows us to track the expansion of all cities and settlements around the world. The second map on the right shows that there is a worrying trend that we observe in many cities. Even when they're established in relatively safe areas, cities start to expand in areas of high flood as they grow. This is especially the case, when urbanization is so rapid that risk-informed land use planning cannot keep up with the urban population growth. So as safe spaces are already occupied, what new settlements do is form in increasingly high-risk zones. Our analysis shows that since 1985, globally, settlements in the highest flood risk areas have expanded significantly faster than settlements in safe areas. In fact, about 120% for the first and 80% for the latter. In other words, risky growth is outpacing safe growth. And this trend has been particularly pronounced in the East Asia and Pacific region. Since 1985, settlements in safe areas have expanded by just over 100%, compared with very high-risk settlements which have expanded by over 160%. Now, globally, about over 36,000 square kilometers of settlements have been built in the highest risk zones since 1985. Of that, 82% have been in low and middle income countries. Now, this high resolution data also allows us to reliably track the evolution of flood exposure in each country and even each city. So the chart that you see on the right-hand side are just an illustration of that work. Depending on geographic, socioeconomic, and institutional factors, each country faces a unique set of pressures and risks. The results of this analysis enable us to work with our clients around the world to understand, one, how risk is evolving, and two, identifying the risk and addressing the main drivers of such high-risk urban growth. Now, on the climate change front, as we all know from the latest IPCC report, that although the future is uncertain, yet it seems that cities will grow and that climate will change, although in disparate ways. Therefore, our very first upcoming Sustainable Development Flagship Report will be focusing on this, exploring the interaction between those two and the mechanisms via which they're linked. How have climate change related shocks, things like drought, floods, landslides, as well as stressors, think pollution, urban heat, water scarcity, have affected the urban development? And in turn, how has the shape that urban development takes in turn affects climate? Our team is exploring very different aspects as listed in this slide, and the map is an example of understanding how higher resolution measurement of the urban heat island effect helps us to better identify how it is related to pockets of existing vulnerability within cities. In the end, what needs to be acknowledged is that although these global data sets are extremely helpful from a high-level overview, they also need to be complemented with local data sets whenever possible for a much more granular and contextually relevant analysis. Local data sets can be the ones that are collected, either through field surveys, digital surveys, focus group discussions, community mapping, or using innovative digital tools and methods, things like Mapillary, open data platforms, drone imageries, and so on and so forth. One such example is our recent partnerships with Slum Dwellers International, SDI, and their local affiliates, which are comprised of the Slum Dwellers Federation and support NGOs, which we've applied in 8 pilot cities in 5 countries. The project that started as a data collection exercise for the most vulnerable slums during COVID-19 achieved really positive outcomes, both direct and indirect, beyond the scope of the project. For instance, the initial delays due to lockdown and other challenges in most cities provided us an opportunity to improve the digital skills of the local affiliates of SDI. So the World Bank team customized and delivered geospatial training series over 7 weeks that covered a broad array of tools from remote sensing data to advanced geospatial data analytics and data visualization tools. This positive spillover effect of these trainings were the additional chain of mappers, volunteers, and slum dwellers who were trained by the original cohort of trainees in each city. Now, to conclude, I'd like to summarize the 3 main points. Over this past decade, big data has improved our knowledge, understanding, and development work on all fronts across all regions. We really do value strong partnerships and collaboration to take the urban agenda forward. This for us is a potential win-win model, as you've seen from the examples of the partnerships with DLR, with SDI, and with the ESA. But we also need to be mindful of privacy in the data that we use, that we collect, and that we share as a way to guide us to achieve positive outcomes without causing negative effects. With that, thank you very much for your attention.
So we had a very nice, very nice points that have been highlighted by the World Bank. So I would like really to thank all the speakers for the inspiring presentations. If we were in a face-to-face conference, I would now invite all panelists to come on stage, but we are on a virtual meeting today, so we'll ask them to switch on their camera so that we can all see our guests on our screens. I hope that we'll have a bit of more time to go through all the panelists with at least one question. So I will start with first with Simonetta. So Simonetta, during your intervention, you presented the European Copernicus program, and it's one of the most ambitious Earth observation programs that has ever been put in place, with a long-standing data continuity, free and open data policies, and universal access. So can you tell us a bit more about the future of the program and its relevance for urban application?
Yes, basically Copernicus, as we've seen here, has many potential use and already being used in support of urban activities. We see how Sentinel-1 can look at subsidence, how Sentinel-2 looks at the land, and how Sentinel-5P, for example, at the air quality. All these satellites will be followed by version CDs, so there is a continuity in terms of satellite development and plans, and so data availability for the users of the current system. But we also have a next generation of Copernicus Sentinel satellites, which is foreseen. It's called Copernicus expansion missions, and these new 6 Sentinel families will be developed and launched in the coming years. The first one is a CO2 dedicated anthropogenic monitoring mission, which is actually built and developed in support of the COP arrangements, the Paris Agreement, so to look at anthropogenic CO2 emissions, and that I think is also very relevant in this context. But this is not the only one. We also have a mission called LSTM, and this mission will help, for example, monitoring land further. So all these data from these new missions will also be available to be integrated and as complementary data to the existing one, to those in the archive already available, and to those of the Copernicus extension mission, which is basically the replica of those satellites we're up and flying right now. So everybody can benefit. The free and open data policy, I think, in this context specifically, will be very useful in that respect, and the data very well for all of you.
Thanks, Simonetta. I mean, it's important, of course, to have this continuity of observation, but it's also important to see that new observations will come soon. So continuity of observation is important, but also the continuity of the data set, of this global data set that we presented to you today. So the next question is to Mattia. So Mattia, you have presented today this a number of global data sets that altogether constitute really a unique suite of products. But can you tell us a bit more about what are your future plans for what concern the improvement of these data sets, but also the expansion to new products?
Sure. I see we have 4 minutes, so I'll try to be telegraphic. We have quite a long pipeline, but let's say the next in the order, as soon as we finish the 6 layers that we presented here, that they will be publicly available. We want to go on with the WSF-Evolution. We want to fill the gap between 2015 with 2019 and even further. So this will be, let's say, our highest priority. And also we would like to target the imperviousness over time, which will allow really to let's say enable analysis on the greenness or on how the cities are becoming more and more dense over about 4 decades in the end. And last but not least, I mean, we would like also to start establishing kind of an observatory on the areas that are experiencing the fastest growth in the planet with high frequency mapping down, for instance, to quarterly updates.
Yeah, thanks, Mattia. Thanks, Mattia. And I think the next questions I will ask is actually to you and Habitat. So the questions will be: how do you think that these global data sets, such as the WSF, can really enable countries achieving the urban development targets within the SDGs, but also within the new urban agenda? And here I will take also a question from the audience that says how we can make sure that the WSF data doesn't remain on the shelf, and it actually does inform decision making at the end. So Robert, can you ask these questions?
Thanks a lot, Mark. And I think, again, in the interest of time, I'll also try and hit both up with the same response. So ideally here, I think the journey has been that there was always mistrust in geospatial data or other observation data sets over the years. And I think what we've tried to do, at least in the last 5 years, is to ensure that we offer quality and trusted data in that space. And through those efforts, we've seen a bit of uptake from many countries in terms of the use of these technologies. And I think that is very evident already from the SDG reporting processes that we've seen since 2015. Obviously, we need to sustain that. We need to grow the capacities. We need to expand the reach of all these technologies by training more, by disseminating most of these tools. And I think earlier I spoke about the Earth Observation Toolkit, which is basically aiming towards putting these tools in the hands of those practitioners, so that once they have that data well processed, then they can be able to turn it into ready evidence-based policies, but also investments as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. And I hope that we'll be able to have 1 or 2 more minutes to finish the session. So the next questions that we'll ask to Nala is how we can really build capacities in the countries to use the satellite data, but also to use derived products such as the WSF. You need to unmute yourself. Okay.
I think where possible, co-development of products and services with the users can really promote the use of the data, and also educating them on how some of the products are developed, as like products like the WSF are developed, can also help the uptake of the datasets by the users. And where possible, sharing of tools, especially when open access data is used, where sharing of tools is possible, when it's done, it can also help in terms of educating the users on the benefit, but also I think it can also create an opportunity for the users also to trust the data, as they'll be able to relate to the data, especially if it can be co-developed or developed at a national level, where they'll be able to engage also with the local people.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I see your questions here. I've seen that we haven't been cut off, so maybe we can take a couple of more minutes. Somebody is asking, are there countries that use or are using the WSF for the preparation of the population census? So I don't know if anybody can answer these questions, maybe Mattia.
No, not yet. I mean, it would be nice, you know, if this might happen in the next future. So that's what we're actually trying to go. We're really trying to support and liaise with as many organizations as possible, and we believe that this could be really an asset, because we have already experienced that also by comparing existing population figures with the actual density that comes out from our calculation. In some cases, numbers are a bit suspicious, which lead us to believing that probably census figures are not really up to date. So this could be really something that we will target or try to target for sure in the next months.
Yeah, that's a really important point, and it brings me actually to a question that I would like to ask to Tawa. So one of the challenges that you have when using the Earth observation data in the Red Cross areas of operations certainly lies in the identifications and monitoring of refugee camps and informal settlements, as we discussed now. So in this regard, can you give us some wishes so as to which capabilities should be developed or expanded for that purpose?
Yeah, I guess when you talk about monitoring, then it has to have a sequence in time, and you have to see the evolution through time. And for the question of camps and informal settlements, sometimes they appear and disappear. So that would be more the frequency of the update, so that we are really able to monitor.
Yeah, it's a very important point. And maybe the last questions I will ask it, I think, to both UN Habitat and NALE. So today we've seen presentations of global data sets, so they have really an unprecedented level of details and accuracy, but they have also some inherent limitations due to the global nature of these data sets, and especially when it comes to use them at a local scale. So how do you think that these global data sets should complement the national and local data? And I think we've heard Robert and Nala that to highlight the importance of national data, and how they can actually be put together to really help countries better monitoring their urbanization trends. So any of you can take that questions. So how we can really make the best use of the global data set with the national data. So I don't know if Nale or Robert, you want to say something? Nale?
Okay,
Sure.
from my side, so different users will require access to a data set at different frequencies and also at different scales. So I think some of the users can definitely use the data as is, but other users are legislated to follow some particular procedure to capture the information they require. So it will be important to allow users to have, I think, flexibility in terms of when they can access the data, because if the data is produced maybe every 5 years or something, it may create a gap in terms of the requirements from the user side. So I think if possible, that local production or generation of the data can definitely add value in terms of how users can use the global data sets to support their operations. In addition to that, I think also, you know, articulating the limitations to users is also very important so that they know how to apply the data set. So just to say that the data set can do 1, 2, 3 without really engaging with the users and understanding their requirements, I think could be misleading. So educating them and also sharing honestly in terms, with honesty in terms of what the limitations of the data are can really help in terms of the uptake. So most of the time, from the analysis, the users can definitely use the data to really see where the settlements are at very high resolution. So there are operations where they may require additional information from the ground, and also maybe use other data sets that they have in their organization to support further analysis and also decision making.
Yeah, very, very important points. Thanks a lot, Nale. I don't know, if Robert, if you want to add anything. I don't think so. So for questions of time, I think we need to conclude these sessions, also to allow people to join other sessions of the WDF. So I would like really to thank warmly all the panelists for their concise and pertinent answers. I hope that you enjoyed this session as much as I did, and that you found the subject interesting and useful for your work. I remind you also that the Q&A window on the WORA platform will be kept active for a few more weeks, so you have time to post your questions. Also, if you listen to the recording of that sessions, and could not be with us today, so the WSF team will regularly visit the site and try to respond to your requests as soon as possible. So don't hesitate also to contact us directly, myself, but also all the panelists. And to conclude these sessions, I would like to give the final words to Dennis Mwaniki from UN Habitat. So Dennis, if you can say a few words to conclude this session.
Thank you very much, Mark. And for me, it's really to thank our very well-detailed panelists who have at least shown us how they're using WSF, but also showing the value of geospatial data. For me, usually, it's not just about the product itself, but also that how to continuously create the trust in the use of geospatial information and observation, because this has the long-term value of this. I think as someone was asking from the listeners about how we ensure that the data is really used for policy and decision making, and is how much we really improve on the quality and ensure that the data responds to what is really needed at the local level, and that for me is really important. Then the last thing I say is the two components I think that the World Bank presenter was mentioned is the issue of collaboration. I know Nale has also emphasized on this, and what is really key here is that the partnership with ISA, DLR, and engaging a lot of partners like UN Habitat, World Bank, and even the users. I know, like for the WSF, we also been sharing in countries and asking them to see how it represents their context at the local level and how usable the data can be. This is really significant because it not only contributes to enhance quality of the product, but also makes it much easier to interact with the end use, because it responds to some of the issues that the users also identify as being issues of importance to them. So with this, I want to thank our presenters, and I also want to very much thank our the attendees to the session, and we look forward to continue to engage in the OVA platform over the next coming weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank Dennis, and thanks to highlight the importance of partnership, because without any partnership, this would not have been possible. So this was highlighted also by Simonetta in her introduction. So it's nice that you say it again, and I'm also a strong believer of partnerships. So I'm glad that I think we achieve really an amazing results with this WSF, and not only, but that's really a great work. And I would like also to remind everybody that we will release two data sets at the end of the month, so on the celebration of the World Cities Days, so the WSF 2019 and the WSF-Evolution. So really keep an eye on this. We will anyway communicate this again through the social medias, but we hope that you will find the value of the WSF as we all try to show to you today. So with this, I think we can conclude this session, so we can stop the recording, and I really wish you a very nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Can we stop the recording? I don't know. I think let's stop the recording, Mattia. Mattia?